tell them check out the blog, bro. YouTube channel called MKO. It's pugilism, boxing algorithm. M stand for Marvin and Kevin's initials KO. Yeah. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? This is the MKO pugilism boxing channel. We love a right hook over here. Right now, today, I'm going to be giving my response and my sort of quote-unquote reaction to a video that was, I believe, taken back in 2017, Instagram video, which has resurfaced again. It's all about Deontay Wilder. He's in a car with somebody, must be someone from his team or a friend. He's on Instagram Live. He's being, at the time, the wider context of it is he's being criticized by certain fans on Instagram Live. They're questioning him, questioning his record. And one of these fans makes a comment, which is not a question, it's a statement. And he says Deontay Wilder basically did not survive or would not survive the Mike Tyson fear era. Deontay Wilder responded to this by basically saying Mike Tyson didn't fight many Hall of Famers. You know, he said, I want you all don't know your history, talking to the fans on the Instagram Live, saying basically his point to them is, you don't know your history, you don't know what you're talking about, you always believe what you're told, and you know, do your homework before you come to me, do your history. How many Hall of Famers did Mike Tyson fight? How many? How many Hall of Famers? He then goes on to say, don't talk about Larry Holmes, because that's a Hall of Famer Mike Tyson fought. Don't talk about Larry Holmes, because Larry Holmes was old. He was way past his prime when Mike Tyson fought him. He then goes on to say, don't talk about Michael Spinks, because Michael Spinks was another great fighter, very, very good light heavyweight, exceptional, and he'll be sort of another Hall of Famer. But Wilder says, don't talk about those two, because one of them, Michael Spinks, he came from light heavyweight to heavyweight, so therefore don't talk about him. He doesn't count. He's irrelevant, and he was scared out of his boots when he fought Mike Tyson. So you can't talk about those two guys, although those are Hall of Famers. You know, again, that gets refuted straight away by the fact that Tyson fought Holyfield, and Holyfield was also a guy who came up from cruiserweight, you know, so he wasn't a career heavyweight. He was a very, very, very good cruiserweight before joining the heavyweight division. So I guess that is what it is. You do what you will with that. So he's going on, and you know, he's saying don't count those two guys. He's saying how many Hall of Famers, and someone said 6, someone said 3, and he goes, yeah, name him, and then somebody goes on to name Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield, and he goes, yeah, only 2, my nigga, only 2. You know, it reminded me of when he said, to this day, we're still struggling to this day. And he said that, and he said, look, he's only fought 2, and Evander Holyfield beat him twice, and Lennox Lewis beat him. Who did he fight? And he said only 2. And he's going on his big tirade about, you know, sort of going after Mike Tyson. He did start, by the way, by giving some sort of respect to Tyson. So in a sense, I can appreciate that part of it. But I think the rest of it is a bit of a cheek coming from someone like Deontay Wilder. He's only fought 2 Hall of Famers, and I'll come on later in the video to why I disagree and why I sort of think it's a bit of a cheat coming from him. So what I've decided to do in this video, it's a bit of a different one, and it's a career comparison video. I just grabbed my trusty mouse here, and I'm just gonna go through a career comparison of both guys, because I think, you know, when it comes to criticizing other fighters, trying to look down on other fighters, it's only fair that we look at your career too. So I've decided here in this video, I'm going to look at the career of Deontay Wilder, what he's done, what he's achieved, and I'm going to look at the career of Mike Tyson and look at how their careers compare. So, right, so first things first, let's look at the early days of both fighters. First of all, Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder. Wilder, he turned pro quite late by old standards, by some standards. He turned pro at the age of 23. In this day and age, I don't think that would be considered that young, 23 years of age. You're still young, you still can grow and everything. So he turns pro at 23, average by today's standards, I'd say. Not really that late. He boxed at elite level as an amateur. As everybody knows, he calls himself the Bronze Bomber. That is because he got a bronze medal in the Olympic Games before turning pro. And in Wilder's career, he was brought along very slowly as a professional. It would take him several years before he was allowed by his handlers to fight at anywhere near world level. And that came in 2015 when he had his first, he went 12 rounds for the first time, fought Bermane Stiverne, and that was for the WBC Heavyweight Championship of the World. Bermane Stiverne, to give you the context of him, he's a guy who fought Chris Arreola for the title, and the WBC title had become vacant as it was vacated by Vitaly Klitschko. Vitaly Klitschko is the elder brother of Vladimir Klitschko, and him and Vladimir ruled the division for a long time. Once Vitaly retired, WBC became vacant, so Stiverne and Arreola, Arreola's a contender sort of guy, those two boxed off for the title, the vacant title, and then Wilder was I believe the first defense for Stiverne. So, Wilder comes in to that fight, definitely shuts out Stiverne, puts on by Wilder standards, definitely he puts on a boxing clinic. He really, really outboxes Stiverne very well, uses his jab, boxes almost a punch-perfect performance, wins pretty much all 12 rounds against Stiverne, and that's his first world title win. So he turns pro 2009, 2015, that's when he has his first foray at world level. That's when he's allowed off the leash to fight somebody at world level. And after this victory, which was, as I said, Wilder's first 12-rounder, his manager, Shelley Finkel, he spoke to the papers in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and there's still an article online you can even read today, one of the local papers there, where Shelley Finkel, his manager, says that Wilder's not ready for unifications. This is back in 2015. He's still a prospect, and he's still basically a baby. So he's just won a world title, but his manager is saying, look, he's been boxing this 6 years as a pro. He's not ready for the big fights with Klitschko yet. We're going to hold him back. We're going to wait for the big fights. He's not ready. He's still a baby. And this is after 6 years as a pro and being an elite amateur, etc., etc. So that's how he gets to world championship level. It's also noteworthy for everyone to remember that at that time, 2015, you had Stiverne, he picked up the vacant WBC, but you also had a man named Vladimir Klitschko who was the recognized number one in the heavyweight division. And rather than go after Vladimir Klitschko, who had all the belts and who was the recognized consensus heavyweight champion of the world, they decided to go after Stiverne, which was the easier pick, which was the guy that was at a lower level, the guy that wasn't really proven like Klitschko was proven. Everybody knew at that time Klitschko was the main man, that if you want to win the heavyweight titles, you win them off of him. But Wilder's team, they took the easier option in Bermane Stiverne. Now, Mike Tyson, by contrast, Mike Tyson boxed as an elite amateur, international level, and that never done anything in the Olympics. I think he got beaten in the trials. Turned pro at 18 in 1985, quite early. He had around 15 fights in his first year as a pro. Within Mike Tyson's first 2 years as a pro, he becomes the youngest ever heavyweight world champion at 20 years of age, where he wins the WBC Heavyweight Championship of the World. He then, in his very next fight, fights the champion, the WBA champion, James Bone Crusher Smith, and he wins the WBA title. So wins the WBC. The very next fight goes and fights another world champion, James Bone Crusher Smith, and Bone Crusher Smith had beaten a good fighter, very good fighter in Tim Witherspoon prior to that. And so yeah, Tyson wins the title, goes on to fight for another title. So he unifies WBC and WBA, you know, within one fight of winning just the WBC. Tyson would then go on to become the undisputed unified champion of the world, you know, exactly 3 fights after winning his first world title. So he wins the world title, wins another one in his next fight, and then, you know, within 2 fights of that, he's got all the belts. So between November of 1986 and August of 1987, Iron Mike Tyson is not only the youngest heavyweight champion of the world, but within that space of under 3 years is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. So in other words, he became, you know, basically the best of his division, of his era at that point in time, within those less than 3 years. You know, Tyson would go on to reign as undisputed champion until November of 1990, when he lost notoriously to James Buster Douglas in 1990 in Japan, I believe in Tokyo. And prior to that, he made 9 successful defenses of his various world titles. So we see Mike Tyson in his first few years, we're not even talking about 5 years, we're talking about his first under 3 years, wins a title, becomes undisputed champion, defends it. You know, this is within, you know, 5 years, he's made 9 defenses, not just of one belt, but of the whole thing as undisputed champion. So the comparison now, latter careers of both men. Tyson's latter career, as most people know, didn't go that well. The most notable thing he did after the Buster Douglas loss was stringing together some wins, and he was able to pick up another world title. He picked up the WBA world title after his loss to Douglas, after stringing some wins together, beats Frank Bruno twice, you know, wins that belt. His career would go a bit downhill from there. He would go on to lose to Evander Holyfield twice. He would go on to lose to Lennox Lewis for the undisputed world championship. And unfortunately, in his last fights, he would lose to Danny Williams and Kevin McBride, 2 guys who were nowhere near sort of world level or nowhere near Mike Tyson's level. But again, he lost to these guys. That's just a fact. That's what happened towards the end of his career. So Deontay Wilder, his career by contrast, he picks up the WBC off of Bermane Stiverne, made several successful title defenses of his WBC belt. And his best win in his career, I'm sure most would agree, was against Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz of Cuba, very, very good amateur, real talented guy. But the thing about Luis Ortiz, the best win on Wilder's resume, is that as much as people rave about him, he doesn't really have any notable names on his resume. And the most notable name he has is Deontay Wilder, and he's lost by KO twice to Deontay Wilder. So it's kind of hard to really put him above other top 10 heavyweights. He's also got Bryant Jennings, who he fought and he beat, and in very good fashion, you know. But again, Bryant Jennings was never a world champion. He's a world level or fringe world level guy, but again, never won a world title, you know, again, just a sort of fringe guy. So again, even as good as Ortiz is, his resume is still kind of thin. And the best opponent Deontay Wilder has ever fought is Tyson Fury. But even again with Tyson Fury, he's only managed to draw with Tyson Fury and then lose by TKO in his last fight. So again, that's still, you know, a great name, but again, you know, he's not really done anything much against Tyson Fury. Fury was pretty clearly the winner in those fights. You know, and in my view, you know, if you want to talk down on Mike Tyson, you've got to be careful here, because when we compare the careers, I've just done a little research there and compared the careers. I think the facts really speak for themselves, because what Tyson achieved in his first 2 years as a pro, under 3 years as a pro, becoming undisputed champion, you know, winning a world title, then winning another one in his next fight, becoming the youngest ever heavyweight champion of the world. I think that those achievements that he got, becoming the #1 in his first few years as a pro, is something that Wilder is still yet to do. And I think those first few years of Tyson's career pretty much eclipsed the entirety of Wilder's career. You know, it kind of eclipses him. So in conclusion, you know, I would say that even the comments Wilder makes about the Hall of Fame, I think for me that's kind of a straw man argument, because you don't judge how great a fighter is by how many Hall of Famers they've fought, because there's no guarantee of Hall of Famers being around in every era. There's no guarantee. Like, I'll give you an example. The era of Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko, where they reigned for just under a decade. In that decade, there wasn't really many Hall of Famers, or you can only say Lennox Lewis was around at the beginning. But although there were no Hall of Famers really, they beat everybody in their era, they dominated, they picked up all the belts, they held on to all the belts, and no one really could beat them. They sort of avenged their losses and stuff, and they had all the titles, they were the main men, and no one could really beat them in their era. And that's why with the Klitschkos, although we consider it a weak era, you know, we can't really dispute the fact that these are great fighters. Bottom line, they're great fighters because they dominated. They won everything there was to win, you know. And as much as I do respect Deontay Wilder and all that he's achieved, I'm not anti-Wilder at all. I do respect the man. The man is a good fighter, and he's an elite level fighter. But I think when you want to criticize other fighters that have come before you, that have achieved what you are yet to achieve, you got to be careful. You know, you got to be careful, and you got to show some respect, because, you know, you could even question the fact that he fought Tyson Fury rather than Anthony Joshua. There was a $120 million deal on the line for him to have 2 fights with Joshua, and prior to that to have the fight with Brazil. He didn't take that deal. He said he's going to be loyal to Showtime, but Showtime rejected some of his fights, you know. So again, it didn't pay off. And the thing is, had he have fought Joshua instead, he would have been the #1 guy. If he beat Joshua, he would have had all the belts, and he would have been undisputed champion. Then his words would have made a lot more sense, because he'd be the #1. He'd be the man with all the belts. He'd be the recognized #1. And the thing is, from where I'm sitting, he took what was considered to be the easier option in fighting Tyson Fury, because at the time, Tyson Fury was a guy who had been on a 2-year layoff, a guy that had gone away and put on a lot of weight, and a guy that was an extremely, you know, he was a real underdog. I think it's only Tyson Fury and his team who really believed that he had a shot of beating Wilder. Most boxing people, coaches, analysts, commentators, everyone, they all believed that Deontay Wilder was going to knock Tyson Fury spark out. So my thing is, if you want to be critical of Mike Tyson fought the best available guys. He fought and he won all the belts. Whereas Wilder, instead of fighting the main man in Anthony Joshua, who had all of the belts at his disposal, he goes and fights someone that's coming off of a layoff, someone who's a huge underdog. And my thing is, you can't criticize a man who had everything, who won everything there was, when you've avoided Joshua and you fought somebody who has no belts. Not that Tyson Fury's not great. Tyson Fury's fantastic. He proved his greatness in how he dealt with Wilder. But if you're Wilder and you're trying to criticize Mike Tyson, who was undisputed, you had the chance to take an undisputed fight. You didn't take it. You know, the first man you fought for the world title in Stiverne, he wasn't the main man. Vladimir Klitschko was the main man. But you didn't take Vladimir Klitschko. You took the easier option. And you could argue that, theoretically, that's what it looked like with AJ and Tyson Fury. You know, AJ was the active man, the man with the belts, the man that was actively fighting at the time. Tyson Fury was the guy who was coming back after a 2-year layoff, and he was fighting guys that weren't really, you know, world beaters. So again, if you're going to be critical of someone, you've got to be careful. And, you know, that's just my my sort of conclusion on it, my thoughts on it. You know, because I honestly feel that, you know, you want to criticize Mike Tyson, first of all, become undisputed champion at least first before criticizing such a fighter as Mike Tyson. Anyway, guys, I know it's a bit of a long one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and, you know, of course, share your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Until next time, MKO Pugilism, over and out.